So welcome everybody. If you haven't gone to get a drink or a healthy dessert over here, please do so. Next January 14th, our next Lunch and Learn is going to be Flip Put Off. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of Flip. He's a Arkansas photographer and does a lot of nature photography, and he's so good. So be sure to come. This is Rachel Yeager, and she is a homeopathic doctor licensed in Kansas and Oregon, and she's come to give us some healthy tips about our bodies and things that we can do to stay healthy, and even our brain can be a healing ally, which is great. So thank you for coming, and we look forward to learning something. Thank you.
I'm a naturopathic doctor, and so I am licensed in Kansas and in Oregon. Outside of Kansas and Oregon, I do consults and help people all over the country. Everyone usually has something different going on with their health, but the brain is what we all have in common. So today, we're going to focus mostly on the brain, and we're going to talk a lot about inflammation too. We're going to focus on how you can use your brain and do tools and exercises at home to actually help with healing and help bring your body back into balance. So if you have questions at any point, feel free to shout out or raise your hand or whatever. And we're going to walk through how our brain works, how to use your brain as a healing ally, get it on our team to help us heal, how to understand inflammation a little bit more, and I'm going to give you 3 concrete things that you can start doing tonight or whatever to help start with your healing journey. So if you want to take notes, feel free. This, I think, is going to be recorded and available, so you can also just watch that if you want to ever reference anything again. And I am not licensed in Arkansas, so I'm not acting as a doctor in this capacity, just acting as a basically a consultant and helping just provide, some information and education. So a little bit about myself. So I first got into holistic health because I got really sick when I was 14. And so ever since then, I started doing a lot of health research. I ended up seeing a local naturopathic doctor. And so I ended up deciding that's what I wanted to do. So I went to naturopathic med school, which is 4 years standard, just like regular med school, but you also learn herbs and diet and things like that. Afterward, I worked at a functional complex chronic illness clinic, and it was really neat. We worked with a lot of people who had already been to Stanford and Cleveland and Mayo, and they weren't getting help. And we were able to help a lot of people. However, I noticed that the brain part was something that was missing from most things that you can do in office with a provider. And how important brain healing, is kind of the missing link that was showing up for everyone. So now I spend the majority of my days doing health consulting, so I can help people all over the U.S. So the whole point of today is how powerful you are, and you're going to feel really powerful by the end of our talk today. You have a lot more control over your health than you think. There is basically, if we think of a pie chart of your health and all the different parts, what you do in your office with your provider is actually probably the smallest part of your overall health. Everything else that you can influence and that you can do at home is arguably sometimes even more important than what you could be doing in the office with your provider. Your mental, emotional, even your spiritual health, they all really affect your overall well-being. And actually, there's a lot of research now showing that these other areas of our health even affect our physical health that we can see in labs, which is really neat. So it's important to keep our brain health, our brain happy, keep our nervous system, which is our brain and the communication with all the nerves in our body, help to keep that regulated. And I'm going to use the term, regulated a lot. That just means balanced, and we're going to talk about what that means as well. Here are some signs that your nervous system, which again is your brain and all the nerves in your body, that it might be dysregulated. So usually people have a couple of these. Trouble focusing is a really big one. Not being able to wind down for sleep, kind of having a racing mind. Getting caught scrolling or letting your Netflix queue roll because your brain just wants stimulation or to be distracted. And if you are having health issues, then constantly thinking about your health, which is a natural body response, but we're going to talk about why that happens. So in order to do what we're going to do today, we need a good understanding of how the brain works. If we can understand our brain, how our brain works, then basically knowledge is power. We can use that to our advantage and actually use our brain to help us heal. We do have a conscious part of our brain that controls me moving my arm right now. And then we also have a subconscious, involuntary part of our brain. That's our more primal, ancient brain. And that part of our brain, its sole focus is to keep us alive. It's keeping our heart beating, it's keeping us breathing. You're not having to think right now about your heart beating or you breathing. And so that subconscious part of our brain is often what actually ends up regulating a lot of systems in our body. So because our subconscious part of our brain, this ancient, primal, some people call it the lizard brain, because this part of our brain is trying to keep us alive, it has a negativity bias. Because our brain taking note of happy things isn't key to survival. But our brain noticing threats and scanning for harmful things is key to our survival. So our brain is constantly building a negative file cabinet of threats to watch out for. It is not building a positive file cabinet of happy, pleasant things, because that's the key to our survival. So here's the different parts of our nervous system broken out here. So we have that voluntary part at the top. That's called our somatic nervous system because it moves our skeletal system and controls us talking, us moving, things that we think about doing. Our autonomic nervous system, autonomic sounds a lot like automatic, it's because it's automatic involuntary. And if we break down that ancient involuntary survival part of our brain, we have our sympathetic, which is known as the fight or flight branch. That branch usually we think of associated with anxiety or feeling kind of amped up. And then we have our parasympathetic, which is our rest and digest. And new research actually breaks down our rest and digest into two different branches. So we have our shutdown freeze branch, which is basically where our body goes into overwhelm. And then we have our safety and rest, which is called the ventral vagal branch. And that's where we feel our best. That's when we feel relaxed and safe and social. We're our highest best self. We're creative. This is generally where we want to spend most of our time, is in our ventral vagal. Our automatic subconscious brain can't distinguish between what kind of threats it's receiving. So you having a deadline at work or at school is the same thing to your brain as if a lion was actively chasing you. Your brain has no idea what the difference is. Our subconscious brain treats everything like a lion is chasing you. There is no such thing as a small threat or a big threat. They're all just threats. So this is kind of a case of how some of our brain signals haven't quite adapted yet to our modern world. In our modern world, we have a lot of deadlines that are not immediately taken care of. So in the past, if we were being chased by a bear or a lion or something, we would either make it and escape or we don't. And we make it and we come back to our tribe and we have all these social cues of being with our tribe and knowing that we're safe. And then, if it goes the other way and we don't make it back, then the threat is gone. So our body doesn't do well with things like insurance payments, which you might pay it tomorrow, but then it's going to be due again next month, and the next month, and the next month. So these kind of chronic and repeating deadlines are new for our brain. Our brain has not learned how to do the fight or flight adaptation with these new stressors. Interestingly, our brain also perceives chronic symptoms and any chronic illness or inflammation as a fight or flight threat as well. So if you have chronic symptoms, then your subconscious brain is going to be in fight or flight mode by default right now, unless you have consciously used tools to shift out of it. Because having something in your body that's causing symptoms, causing illness, causing inflammation is a threat. And we know all threats are the same as the lion chasing you. So your brain is going to keep you in fight or flight if you're having any kind of chronic illness going on. So health anxiety is super common because of that. Once you start having symptoms, you're going to have anxiety as a natural consequence of that. And it can be the other way around too. Sometimes anxiety spirals and makes our symptoms worse. But it's really normal to have health symptoms and then have anxiety as a consequence of the health symptoms. So why can't we just hang out in fight or flight mode and just stay in that mode? So we actually do not function optimally in fight or flight mode. Our immune system literally shuts down. We can't fight off infections well when we're in fight or flight mode. Our cells are not going to function fully, so they're only going to send the bare minimum messengers and chemical signals that they need to for survival. Hormones are going to go to the back burner because we don't need hormones to survive. Sex hormones, thyroid, all of those can start to drop. So if we stay in fight or flight too long, eventually we downshift into a shutdown state of numbness, overwhelm, and depression. A lot of people, if you've ever experienced depression, that's often actually what depression is your body going into a numb, shutdown, overwhelmed state. Our body thinks that we did not outrun the lion. So now our body is actually trying to play dead as a last defense. And as a physiological defense, it numbs us in case we're about to be eaten. So a lot of people who are experiencing depression is a consequence of the body having been in fight or flight, go, trying to problem solve, having so much stress for so long, that then you end up in this overwhelmed, numbness, shutdown state, and our body numbs us because it thinks we're about to be eaten by a lion. In this shutdown state, it's very common to feel sad, hopeless, disconnected, and disassociated from our body. All a consequence of that kind of numb, shutdown state. So everything that we're talking about falls under the polyvagal theory umbrella. This is a theory by Stephen Porges. He did all the research on this, made it really easy to understand and really popular. And basically, our brain has those three main states that it can be in. We can be in our social, engaged, parasympathetic, rest and digest. We can be in sympathetic, fight or flight. We're trying to problem solve, we have things to address, we're stressed, we're going, we're trying to get things done. Or we can be in dorsal vagal, where we were going, running from the lion for too long, so now our body's putting us in shutdown. We're numb, we're collapsed, we're kind of dissociated from our bodies. So take a second and see if you can do a scan of your body and see what state you're in right now. You might want to close your eyes to make it a little bit easier. You can kind of tune into your breathing, tune into your thoughts, and see if you can tell what state you're in right now. And even just checking, like you're just doing right now, is actually a form of mindfulness, checking in and becoming aware of your state. That actually in itself starts to regulate your brain state and help you be in a more calm, regulated brain state. So that is an example of mindfulness and using that to help us regulate our brain. So here is the lovely huge chart where we can look at a little bit more in detail on what's happening with the connection between your brain and your body. So if we start at the bottom, in the green zone, this is our safe zone. When we are feeling safe, all of those things that are under the increase, our digestion, our intestinal motility, which controls how regular our bowel movements are, whether we're feeling an easy fear response or not, whether we want to be social with other people, that all is going to increase when we're feeling social and we're in this ventral vagal state. When we are in fight or flight, yellow in the middle, this is known as sympathetic state. You can see we start to have our blood pressure increase, our heart rate goes faster, we actually have increased blood clotting risk, and we're going to be more defensive. Our emotions are going to be a little bit amped up. We're going to be more likely to feel rage, anger, irritation, frustration, all these things that we normally associate as being negative emotions. And then, when we've been in the fight or flight for a long time, and so we end up in the freeze, then that's where we kind of get that collapse, immobility, numbed out state. You can see that in the decrease section, everything kind of shuts down. Even our temperature regulation shuts down. our immune response really starts to shut down. So it's really interesting. We've been able to map out all these things between what's happening in our brain and what is physically happening in our body. So even people who have high blood pressure, a lot of times we can correlate that with spending a lot of time in the fight or flight state. So give a show of hands if you felt like you were in fight or flight or in like a numb shutdown state when you did your check-in. Anyone want to share? Was everyone feeling happy and balanced? That's great. So it's pretty common, in our modern world to have this kind of fight or flight stress or to be in a numb shutdown state. We basically live with chronic stress. And especially if you have health issues on top of that, then you're going to be in a go, go, go state of searching and problem solving and trying to take action for your health. So we can easily get stuck in fight or flight mode. We weren't meant to live in fight or flight mode. We were meant to be in fight or flight just while we're outrunning the lion and then go back to baseline and spend most of our baseline in the nice rest and digest. We can get stuck here, especially in our modern world. And when we're in this emergency survival state, again, our immune system shuts down, our cells stop communicating, our bodies can't rest and repair, and we're not even going to be digesting well. So we're not going to be getting the nutrients from our food that we need as building blocks for our whole body to get to be able to repair itself. So our thoughts, our emotions, and even our past memories are chemical cocktails in our brain. So that means that we're firing certain sequences and certain patterns that are tied to each emotion or each thought pattern that we're having. If we can break that firing sequence, then we can rewire our brain to fire a different chemical cocktail in response to the same trigger, the same stimulus. So we're going to talk about what that means. Does anyone have any questions so far? I forgot to ask that. No? Okay. So, to get out of fight or flight or a freeze, which is the numb shutdown, whether we're in sympathetic or we're beyond and we're feeling more numbed, we have to feel safe. That's the number one thing that has to happen. Our bodies have to know that we're safe, and then our brain feels safe. So our body uses safety cues from our environment to know whether it's safe or not. We can actually train our brain to find this feeling of safety, knowing how our brain works. Brain health and brain rewiring is probably, in my opinion, the number one missing component of most health programs, even ones that are really holistic. Because the brain is something that we kind of think of as being separate from our bodies. Really, our brain is just an organ in our body. It's a big part of us, big piece of the puzzle. And your brain state matters. So your nervous system affects inflammation and your immune system. The goal is to have balance and peace in our nervous system. However, physical health threats are very real. So we're not dismissing or minimizing any physical health threats. We're just trying to keep our nervous system as calm as possible so we can have the best outcome possible and have the easiest path to healing. I kind of think of it as you're either walking downhill or you're trudging uphill through quicksand or the mud or something. You can still make progress, but it's going to be a lot harder if your brain is fighting you every step of the way. And inflammation affects our brain a lot. Something that we can do is try to keep our inflammation low to protect our brain so it can function as well as it possibly can and more easily be in the rest state. So here are all some signs of how chronic inflammation manifests in the nervous system. So you can scan through and see if you have any of these. Say probably the most common ones are feeling tired, having brain fog, and having some kind of pain or lack of motivation and trouble sleeping. And a lot of times we're not thinking about these being tied to inflammation or the nervous system. So let's talk about some things that cause brain inflammation. We have food additives and inflammatory oils. Unfortunately, with most of the snacks and the things that we get, the oils that are used are seed oils, which is usually fine. Seed oils are actually healthy, but the way they're processed currently makes them rancid. So we're literally getting oxidized, rancid, spoiled oils in all of our snacks. And even if we're buying oil, vegetable oil or something off the shelf. So most of the oils that we're eating, if we're not doing avocado oil or olive oil, or making sure that we're doing cold expeller pressed oils, by default, they're going to be rancid the way that they're processed. So a lot of our food and diet can definitely contribute to inflammation. Having exposure to heavy metals or other toxins, even just driving down the highway, breathing in the fumes, we can get toxin exposure. If you have new furniture in the home, if you're using lotions or skincare products, even the water that we drink, and it goes on and on and on. One of the big things here is things that we do that lower our melatonin. So looking at screens late at night, watching something stimulating, being on social media, being on our phone before bed, that actually lowers our brain's melatonin sleep hormone. And our sleep hormone does so much more than just sleep. It's anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer. So if you're looking through here and starting to feel kind of overwhelmed, like these are just all more things that you have to do to be healthy, then try to pause that train of thought, because there's ways to take action on these, but do it from a supportive, nurturing, balanced rest and digest state, instead of doing it from the sympathetic state, which even just reading through this list, I find myself starting to go into the sympathetic state of all these things that we have to think about. So it's all about addressing it from the right state and the right frame of mind. Body inflammation causes brain inflammation, which causes body inflammation, which causes more brain inflammation. So this tends to be kind of a catch-22 spiral. So for example, if we're in pain, so we're not getting enough sleep, but because we're not getting enough sleep, that's causing brain inflammation, then that brain inflammation causes further pain, so then we're not getting even more sleep, so then we're getting even more brain and body inflammation. And the cycle goes on and on. Another example is if we have autoimmunity, but we don't know how to check for the root cause of what's triggering our immune system, then our immune imbalance causes inflammation in the body and in the brain, and then our brain inflammation causes us to feel overstimulated and depressed. So then it's harder to make good nutrition choices and do any kind of meal planning or do any kind of self-care. And then we get even more inflammation as a result. So this is just kind of showing how tied in our brain and our body are with influencing our inflammation levels. You can break the cycle. Very good news. You can absolutely break the cycle. Everything in our body is connected, and you're a whole that's made of so many different parts. And there's no one single thing that will fix you or be the silver bullet. It's really looking at yourself holistically, looking at all of these areas, looking at your brain, your physical body, your emotions, your mindset, your beliefs. So if you are able to have that peace of mind and know that you are truly doing everything in your power to support your health, for a lot of people, that's the impetus to be able to leave the fight or flight searching mode and relax into the rest and heal mode. So let's talk about 3 things that you can start doing right now to actually help your brain lower inflammation levels and be in the rest and heal state. So this is really interesting. This comes from research by Dr. Amen, who's the brain doctor. He did a bunch of scans, special MRI scans on people who were doing different practices. And one of the top ones he found that made the most difference and actually changed the blood flow in the brain and the size of different parts within the brain was gratitude. And we kind of, gratitude is something that we probably think wouldn't make as big of a difference. He actually shows, even physically, that this changes our brain. So gratitude helps combat our brain's negativity bias, which is our brain's tendency to have the negative file cabinet and be scanning for threats only, taking less stock of happy experiences and just looking for threats. Gratitude helps us rewire that brain's tendency for survival in that way. And research shows gratitude can improve sleep, can boost our mood, can actually help our immune system function better, and it actually lowers our risk of disease. And so the way that this was done in the research with Dr. Amen was once a day. Most people find it easiest to do at night. Just saying 3 things that you're grateful for. And that was enough to start rewiring the brain. And consistency is the key. So doing this every night is the key. Another thing that's really helpful is going to bed and waking around the same time, give or take like 30 minutes. If you do this, you are helping strengthen and boost your natural circadian rhythm. That helps regulate your cortisol, which is your stress energy hormone, and your melatonin, which is your sleep hormone. We know that, again, melatonin, way more than just a sleep hormone, it actually helps lower inflammation in the body. It's even given as a cancer treatment because it's so effective in lowering inflammation. And so if we can have our cortisol high in the morning and our melatonin high at night, then we have energy during the day, and the cortisol during the day is helping keep our inflammation low. And then our melatonin at night helps us sleep and helps us keep our nighttime inflammation low. So it's, everyone has different schedules, so not everyone can do this, but as much as you can, going to bed and waking at the same time. Yeah?
I know it varies per person, but
Yeah.
according to your research, what is the best hours of sleep to shoot for?
That's a great question. Most research shows that if you can be asleep by 10, the hours from 10 to 2 are like double sleep hours. You're going to get the most restorative sleep. So everyone's different, like you said. So not everyone loves to be asleep by 10, but if you can, that's the golden time to be asleep is from 10 to 2.
What time should you aim to rise? If you're saying 4 hours is all you
No. You still want to sleep about 8 hours, but you really want to try to catch those hours from 10 to 2 in your 8 hours so that they're extra powerful. But most people are sleeping too little. We were all told that you only need to sleep like 6 to 7 hours. Most men need 8 hours, and most women need like 9 hours. So a lot of people simply aren't sleeping enough as well.
So is there too much sleep?
So that has been debated. The recent consensus on that is no. Your brain would not be sleeping if you didn't need it. So if you have extra inflammation, if you're fighting something off, if you're in like a numb, shut down state, then your brain's going to want to sleep more. But the research shows your brain wouldn't be having you do that if you weren't, accomplishing something by sleeping more. Yeah. Which is funny because we were all told not to sleep too much. So, yeah. Yeah. Any other questions about sleep?
What if, as I've gotten older, I don't sleep as well?
Yeah.
So is it melatonin? Should I be maybe taking some of that, or I don't
Yeah.
take anything? And sometimes I just don't sleep.
Yeah.
So,
That's a really common physiological effect where with time, our sleep cycles change and we start to basically sleep lighter and less overnight. And then our body wants more naps during the day.
yes.
So getting naps would be the best way. But otherwise, yes, a lot of people take melatonin to help compensate for your melatonin dropping. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, if my schedule allows, I should try to be asleep by 10 and then just let my body tell me when it's time to get up.
Yeah, probably shooting for like 6 a.m., wake up or later. Yeah. Yeah. And daylight savings kind of shift our cycles a little too, make our brains confused. So we could factor that in. But yeah. And so a lot of people, to help regulate your cycle and get on that cycle so that your body's actually tired to fall asleep by 10, a lot of people use sun therapy lamps within 30 minutes of waking. Because the serotonin and dopamine boost from the blue light from the lamp will basically re-regulate your circadian rhythm and make your body make a bunch of cortisol so that your cycles reset. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if this, I know Bentonville checks out sun therapy lamps. I don't know. That's available here. Okay, yeah. They are available if you want to check one out. They rent them out. Yeah. Any other questions about sleep? Yeah.
What does exposure to light have to do with like brain function and knowing
Yeah.
day versus night?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our body uses a cortisol curve to regulate actually the functioning of all of our cells and organs. So our cortisol is supposed to peak within 30 minutes of us waking and then slowly taper off throughout the day. And then or by nighttime when we're trying to go to sleep, it's supposed to bottom out. And we need our cortisol to be low to make melatonin so that we sleep. Cortisol, when it's balanced and it's in the right range, is anti-inflammatory. If it's low or if it's high, it's inflammatory. And then if we're not getting melatonin, which is always anti-inflammatory, then we're missing out on that anti-inflammatory boost from the melatonin. So just regulating cortisol and melatonin, our eyes have receptors in the back that specifically pick up the blue light and the full spectrum from the sun. And so blue light screens, like our tablets, our phones, our computers, our TVs, they actually mimic the sunlight, and that's part of why they keep us awake and get us off of our natural cycle. And part of why people feel like they get reset when they go camping because they don't have all of that extra light. And so that's one way, is the cortisol and melatonin. And then the other way is the lights are not just increasing cortisol, they're actually increasing serotonin and dopamine, which are our brain's feel-good neurotransmitter chemicals. And if those aren't balanced, then we're going to have more inflammation. Because we know taking serotonin medications, like antidepressants, helps lower inflammation. It's because we know serotonin now lowers inflammation. So we want enough serotonin. And so, for example, in the winter, where we all are experiencing right now, the seasonal affective disorder is usually from our serotonin and our dopamine dropping really low, because we're not getting that same morning light exposure. Yeah, did that answer your question?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it unusual for people to have, over the course of a year, that there'll be times when you're having 6 hours of sleep and you seem to be in a good place, and then there's times when you sleep 10 hours? Is
Yeah.
that pretty common?
I would say yes. I feel like from what we all kind of think is common, just from the way work schedules are set up and things, we think we're supposed to be showing up the same way every day. But it's really common for both men and women to go through cycles of more sleep, less sleep, and especially in the winter. You know, think of every other animal as hibernating, going into hibernation right now, and we're trying to keep up with our same summer schedule. So in places like Finland, where they're getting a ton of light in the summer months and then like no light in the winter, they're having to put in all these blackout curtains and stuff because otherwise they don't sleep in the summer. And your body's naturally more awake and you don't sleep as much when you get a ton of sun exposure.
I think if you're in a little depression,
Yeah,
it's not uncommon to increase sleep.
I would agree
Because
with
you don't
that.
have anything to get up in.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and our serotonin and our dopamine help us feel awake, and those drop in depression. And depression is also very, very associated with brain inflammation. And so anytime our body has inflammation, it wants more sleep to repair itself.
But the opposite of that is racing brain, where there's something going on.
I know.
You're talking about firing, I understand.
I know. It's hard. We have half of our brain neurochemicals are the gas that get us amped up and have us give energy and feel good and motivated and, awake. And then the other half of our brain chemicals are the brake, and they calm us and they help us sleep and they make us tired. So you can have any kind of imbalance among all of those. And then on top of that, it's usually the cortisol that's causing the racing mind at night. So that's a whole separate, separate from the brain chemicals. And if our cortisol is not dropping low at night because, we're really stressed during the day, or maybe we're not getting that kind of wake up in the morning, so our body's evenly distributing our cortisol throughout the whole day instead of peaking it in the morning and then dropping it. If that's happening, or if we're using screens and stimulating things close to nighttime, then our body keeps making cortisol, and that's usually what causes the racing mind. So you can have a cortisol dysfunction and have a neurotransmitter imbalance, which is actually the most common. Most people have both.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions about sleep or neurotransmitters? Okay. So waking and going to bed at the same time every day, super important because of all of those neurotransmitters and the cortisol melatonin curve. And then the third thing that we can do is you can have mindful laughter at least once a day. This doesn't have to be spontaneous. This can be you like just deciding right now that you're just gonna laugh. Like it doesn't matter what the trigger is. For most people, it's easiest to put on like a funny show, and then if it has a laugh track, then you just laugh out loud and make yourself laugh along with the laugh track. But otherwise, you can just tell yourself a joke or whatever you want to make yourself laugh. And the reason that that's important is because you're not laughing when you're running from a lion. Your brain knows you are safe if you are laughing. That's the only environment you would be laughing in, is a safe environment where your survival is not being threatened. So laughter makes us feel safe, and our brain uses it as a safety cue to know when we can leave fight or flight, and know that it's safe to come back down into our rested, social, balanced, healing state. So does everyone want to fake laugh with me?
Sure.
1, 2, 3. And there you go. You just helped lower your brain state. And then here's a bonus fourth thing. If you think about something that makes you happy for 1 minute, so if you have grandkids, or if you have a puppy, or anything that makes you feel a little happy response in your body, if you have a kiddo, think about your happy thing for a little minute here. And as you think about it, your immune system is actually starting to make more antibodies. Antibodies are what help fight us, fight off a cold, keep us from being sick. There are immune warrior cells. So just thinking about something cute or something like puppies, they did the research about puppies, it actually makes your brain make more antibodies. So if you're ever on an airplane and someone is sneezing next to you, think about puppies for a minute, and you'll be less likely to get sick.
So while we're driving our cars,
Yeah.
they need to think about puppies.
I think that'd be good too. I think you should do it all the
And then
time.
they'll-
I think everyone should think about puppies all the time.
Yeah.
So overall, I want this to kind of be a hopeful message of we have this tool at our disposal at home. And so if you can understand how your body is processing the foods that you eat, so you can use them as anti-inflammatory tools and eat intuitively with what your body needs. You can lower your pain levels so you can think clearly. You can be in a balanced place so you can understand what your immune triggers are, what could be causing inflammation in your body. And if you can help your body and your brain and understand what's going on a deep level, so you can support yourself really thoroughly, then that's when I see people heal. Is when you really understand what's going on in your body and why, and everything that's in your power to influence. So here's just kind of a reminder of holistic health in general. Here are all the different areas of health that are options. We have brain, mental health. We have detox support. Our body naturally does biotoxin and elimination every day, which is detox. But we can always help, because in this modern world, we have a lot of toxin exposure. We can always help with lifestyle and sleep. We can use food as medicine. We have emotional and spiritual health. We have cellular support, helping our cells function their best. The health knowledge to understand what's going on in our body, so we can make the best choices. Be able to advocate for ourselves. If you're able to advocate for yourself in your doctor appointments, that's huge, because sometimes we need more things than what we're being offered. And then just understand what testing and treatment options you have. So if you're interested in any of this, I have a Facebook group where you can learn more. I have a website. That's my username on most social medias. I do have an email list on my website if you want to stay up to date. Sometimes I do free workshops like this. And then if you're ever interested in talking more about getting support, I do offer free 15-minute calls on my website. Okay, so we're gonna give ourselves a self-love hug or a pat on the back. This is part of nourishing and supporting yourself. You showed up for yourself today. Thank you for doing it. And that's an act of self-love. All right, so that is all of my presentation. So the rest of the time I can just answer any questions, or I know a couple people had some specific health goals, so I can always kind of talk through what are some things going on in certain situations. Yeah, go ahead.
What tests can I ask my doctor to perform to determine whether I do have an inflammatory?
Yeah, that's a great question.
If nothing shows up on normal blood screen?
Yeah. So I know you're sharing about uric acid. Uric acid in itself is inflammatory. So helping lower your uric acid levels. Our body has multiple metabolism processes, and some people, for genetic reasons or other reasons, are not completing the full process. You're stopping halfway through metabolism, and uric acid is basically a buildup of a metabolism pathway not getting to run its full course. So usually looking at your nutrients, doing like a nutrient test to see if you're deficient in nutrients, and talking to your doctor about getting the right nutrients. Most people who have uric acid buildup are having nutrient deficiencies because our body needs nutrients to run each step of the metabolism pathways.
I mentioned to you before that I've lost a lot of weight.
Yeah,
The areas that I have loose skin, I have a membership at the activity center here. Just up the
yeah.
road. And when I get in the pool, I do have some areas that still want to float towards the top.
Yeah,
Because of fat, but I have areas of loose skin that are filled with fluid.
yeah,
But when she tests for like white blood cell count and things like that,
yeah,
what, are there any other blood work tests that you
yeah.
perform? Or
I mean, with fluid buildup,
DNA tests? that you want
Yeah.
to
we always want to rule out autoimmunity. So you can screen for that with an autoimmune test. And then making sure that the liver is functioning properly, because if your liver is slow, that can cause a buildup of fluid in the body. A lot of times lymph is affected, but we can't test for that with labs. That would be an imaging thing. So you could always talk about doing an ultrasound in any areas that have fluid, and checking out your lymph flow in that area. And there are a ton of non-conventional labs that are really helpful for figuring out what's going on in that area. But it probably needs to be a little more tailored to what's going on overall. But there's a test called the OATS test, O-A-T, and it actually looks at the metabolism pathways to see if you have any buildup, if you're stopping your pathway. I think that's always really helpful when there's fluid building up. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. In the 50s, they did learn up on mental health.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that were suffering maybe a little bit bipolar, that would be very mania or severe depression.
Yeah.
At the time, they did brain shocking.
Yeah.
People. What was the purpose of that?
That's a great question. I don't know that I fully can answer that, but I would imagine that the electric stimulation was just resetting those chemical cocktail pathways, the neuron firing. It was probably, honestly, overloading the electrical circuits in the brain so that it would kind of reset. So our synapses would shut off and then be forced to reopen. I have no idea.
Other than just to watch people go like.
Yeah, I know. Luckily, that's not really done anymore. Yeah, I'm not really sure. But I will say something very interesting is there has been newer research, and plenty of people who've been diagnosed with bipolar or even things like schizophrenia actually have celiac disease or have severe food intolerances or have something causing inflammation in the body. So our brain's just an organ in our body, so if we're having inflammation in our knee, our brain's going to be inflamed too. So, yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to look into that more.
So along the bipolar,
Yeah.
along that bipolar line, my baby sister was diagnosed with it a while ago. She's got epilepsy.
Yeah.
Would that be the number one cause to it, or is there maybe something else?
Yeah. Usually the same immune trigger that causes epilepsy causes bipolar, because it's causing inflammation. So like epilepsy, we usually have brain inflammation, and if you were to test neurotransmitters with urine, which most people aren't doing, then you would see high glutamate levels and high excitatory neurotransmitters. And so our brain is usually making high glutamate because of an inflammation response. So a lot of people with epilepsy actually have undiagnosed viral infections or Lyme disease or things like that, that's basically causing the brain to be severely inflamed. So then glutamate levels rise, which triggers hyperactivity in the brain, which is a seizure. And then also we would be having bipolar because we're having brain inflammation. So a lot of times there's a hidden, biotoxin, like an infection or mold exposure. Yeah.
Obviously, you don't have time to cover it now, but what resources would you direct me towards for dietary recommendations?
Yeah. If we're looking like more at brain health, Dr. Mark Hyman has a book called like the Ultramind Solution. It's all about eating to help lower your brain inflammation. Otherwise, for overall, diet guidelines, I can't say that can't think of a resource off the top of my head that encompasses like everything that I would want to put in there, but overall, if you're doing like more of I know you're already talking about keto, so if you're doing more of a keto friendly, that's always helpful because you want to be eating your fats, but you also want vegetables and fruits.
Are there any items that you would tell me within the keto spectrum to avoid?
Yeah.
Because they,
Yeah, probably the inflammatory fats. So like anything that says it has canola oil or vegetable oil, and it's not cold pressed, expeller pressed, which it would list. If it has sunflower oil or safflower oil and it's not cold pressed, those are the biggest culprits probably with the keto products. But I'll chat with you a little more after, so I can give you a couple of resources. Yeah. Yeah, usually with detox, we're wanting to primarily support our liver. Our liver is the first, place of backup for detox. Myself, there's a supplement called Liver Refresh by Now Foods, and I take it every day. It has everything that your liver needs for each phase of the detox cycle. It's pretty safe. There's not any significant interactions with that supplement. So that's helpful, and then obviously hydration. And it's not just drinking enough water, it's getting your minerals to retain the water within the body. So adding electrolytes or adding a pinch of unrefined sea salt to each glass of water. And then probably the other most important thing is making sure you're having, regular elimination every day. And everyone always laughs at talking about this, it's really important. And so we all want to be having 1 to 2 daily bowel movements, no straining, soft serve ice cream consistency, sausage shaped. And if you need to, you can use a squatty potty, and there's plenty of magnesium supplements available that are the first go-to for any kind of backup. So if we're not regularly eliminating, then we're, not going to be detoxing there either. Yeah. Did you have any specific detox questions? Yeah.
Like you hear about the extreme ones.
Yeah, like the cleanses or the juice things, or yeah.
Extreme and everything.
Reading some books that involve how much diet affects mental disorders like ADHD.
Yes,
Or
ADHD is a big one. Yeah.
bipolar, or some of the more mild like autism spectrum.
Yeah.
How changing
Mhm.
diet can have a significant impact.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah, for
we're
sure.
very serious about that.
Yeah. And I will say, a lot of times it's pairing diet, but a lot of people who are having ADHD and autism and that kind of things are having high toxins. And so you always need to screen for things like mold exposure or chemicals and things like that. Yeah.
There's been a higher increase of ADHD in the military and,
Oh yeah.
that makes sense, exposure.
Yeah.
Good exposure to.
For sure. And I'm sure there's a lot of living in the fight or flight state as well. So yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I'll stick around if anyone has questions that you want to ask. Chat a little more one-on-one. But thank you all so much for coming and sharing this with me. I really appreciate it. Go think about puppies and laugh
Right.
and do your little gratitude exercises.